right, guys, so as mentioned, as promised, we have Miss Anastasia Walker here, someone very special who recently passed her CISSP exam. So thank you for your time, Miss Anastasia.
Thank you so much for having me, Baj. I'm happy to be here.
So how do you finally feel to be over CISSP journey? Must be a big relief.
I am so happy. Yeah, that was just such a long and arduous journey. So I'm definitely happy and relieved that it's over.
All right, so tell us a little bit more about your journey, like how long you prepped for it, like what was your struggle like, the journey overall, for the people out there who are prepping for this exam.
So it was definitely a marathon and not a sprint. It took me about 6 weeks from start to finish to, go through reading the books and like doing like the deep dive prep.
Right.
I had definitely been like passively reading before then, but at the 6 week mark, that's when I really started to like get into it. So anywhere between 6 and 8 weeks is about the timeline.
So you're telling me between 6 to 8 weeks, it's doable if you really like dedicate your time and really sacrifice and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like you can definitely do it. You just have to tune out all of the noise. You have to mute the outside, the distractions, everything that's calling you. You just have to get really laser focused, and I think that'll be enough to do it.
All right, guys, so like one of the things, just for everyone's reference out there, she's definitely been a huge part of my journey, and I definitely look up to you. So tell us a little bit about what content you use to prepare for the CISSP exam. I heard, or like I know for the fact, but a lot of people ask me about like, there's not one magical formula to like get CISSP, like books or videos. Like, what do you recommend? Like, what did you use for the preparation of the CISSP exam?
Right. So I think the thing with the CISSP is that everyone's experience with the exam is different. I think that your background has a lot to do with the resources that you'll need to use studying. So for me, my primary resource was the Sybex book. During my studies, I read that book from cover to cover, so I kind of used that to help build my foundation. I kind of wanted to make sure that I had like at least a good foundation in the knowledge before I deep dive into any other resource. So
Right.
I used that initially. I definitely used Kelly Handerhan's
Yep.
Cybrary
Yeah.
videos to supplement the reading. I used, I think it was ITDojo's.
ITDojo, yes.
ITDojo's little questions of the day. I thought those were really good. He gives really good explanations. YouTube for like things that I may not have understand. Like initially when I was trying to really understand the OSI model, I was like, how does all of this work? So I definitely did a few Google searches and YouTube videos. I just used a lot of different resources, but I think the key thing is to be able to get all the foundational knowledge there.
Yep.
I think if you try to build without having a stable foundation, you're going to set yourself up for failure.
Yep.
So that's one of the main advice that I can give.
And just for everyone's audience, I just want to tell out there that there's no magical formula. There's not a single book which will give you all the content out there, right? So it'll be your journey might be very unique or different than mine or Anastasia, yours, right?
So one thing I want to add, it definitely depends on your background. So like an example I was giving, like if you're someone who does network engineering for a living, you might not need that much, resources and guidance when it comes to learning the OSI model, because you learn that in your day-to-day job functions. Whereas someone who have never touched the stack before, you're not really familiar with networking, may need more resources so that they're fully able to understand the concept. So
Yep.
It just really depends.
Yep. So for the people out there who are preparing for the exam, from our experience, what can they learn? Like, how would you rate the content, I guess, from the most helpful to the least?
So I think out of all the resources I use, I would have to say I found Sybex to be very helpful. I mean, I know that it's a big book and no one wants to read a book from cover to cover, but I think just like having the grit to kind of like stick it out and just read it. Even if you don't read every single word, just at least go through the end of chapter summary where they kind of centralize the key takeaways from each chapter. I think that's really important. I think also the questions at the end of the chapter, to include the written labs, are very important, because the written labs you're not able to, just select answer A, B, or C, or D. You
Yep.
kind of have to see, like, well, did I really learn it? So I think that the written labs was a good check for me to see whether or not I needed to go back and read more into a concept.
Right.
So I think the Sybex was a really good foundation. Another thing that I think was really good was Kelly Handerhan's videos
Yep.
for Cyber. I think that was great. I think she drops a lot of golden nuggets. I think she drops a lot of like different acronyms and things to help you, you know, keep certain concepts in your head so that like you don't forget it.
Yep.
I think she does have a good way of breaking down material.
Right.
So I think once you have, you know, all the material, all the knowledge, it's just like, you know, kind of testing yourself to make sure that you truly understand it. So if I could probably only use 2 resources out of everything I used, it would definitely be the Sybex book and Kelly. And, you know, if you're struggling, and another thing that I would give is to make sure to dive in to any domain that you're struggling in.
Yep.
Don't run away from the domains that you're struggling in, because the CISSP is going to hit you right there.
Yeah.
So my best advice would be, if you're struggling with the OSI model and networking, you need to go back and keep reading about the
Yep,
OSI model and
absolutely.
networking. Don't try to run away from it, because the way the exam is set up, it will give you more questions, you know, within that domain. So if you're already struggling it, you don't want to have to answer more questions in like one of your weaker domains. So you need to make your weak domain your strong domain.
Yo, so actually, by the way, you made a great point about the domains. So here's the next question. For you, cryptography might be the hardest domain, and for me, networking might be the hardest, right?
Right.
Like, what would you recommend for people, especially like domains like cryptography, networking? Like, I'm assuming you spend a lot of time because like these are some of the biggest domains out there, even like risk management. So like, how would you rate like some of these domains, and like what do you think Sybex is the best way to go? Because I'm assuming with like Sybex, you need a lot of other sources to, you know, get your OSI model down, ports, protocols. So like, what are some of your tips you would offer to our audience to, you know, prepare for some of these big domains?
So what I will say, and what my experience was taking the exam, I don't feel like it went into too much deep granular detail
Right.
within these domains. So I think how the exam is set up, if you can answer like the basic questions correct, you'll kind of keep on going.
Yeah.
But if you start getting like the simple, you know, cryptography questions wrong, then it'll start to get more into the granular details.
Right.
So my exam, I was fortunate, you know, it wasn't very detailed into cryptography. So for even trying, so I'll just say that about like test taking perspective. But from learning perspective, I think the only thing that I can recommend is you find a source that you're able to understand, because some people, they might be able to read Sybex and understand. Some
Right.
people, like for Kelly, I think that she does a really good job breaking down the cryptography domain. I think she gives really good examples, like even she kind of talks about Kerberos, and I think she even referenced the circus or something like
Carnival.
that. Like, the carnival.
Carnival.
Or something like that, yeah. So I think somebody like Kelly, who gives really good examples, so
It just stick in your mind.
it sticks in your mind and you're able to understand it more. So if you find that like reading it is like dry and like you're just not getting it, use a video, use some kind of visual, like use something else that will appeal to different senses, and maybe, because sometimes it's very hard to just continue to read, you know, straight book. So I would go to YouTube. People have different ways of explaining things, so I think a part of this exam is learning yourself, right, and learning how you learn.
Yep.
The way someone else learns, you might not be able to learn like that. So you have to find a source that you know, resonates with you and that you're able to understand. So for me, Kelly, you know, or having an instructor, or if you know like one of your coworkers is really good in networking, or like your system admin is really good in cryptography, you might want them to explain to you how those things work.
Absolutely.
I think at a foundational level, you need to be able to conceptualize how it works and why it's important. That's the real thing. Why is cryptography important? You
Yep.
know?
Yep. So, sorry.
No, that was all.
Okay, awesome. So one of the biggest things I personally experienced, I'm assuming you did as well, and a lot of people out there asking, that it's really an English exam where you need a risk advisor, CEO kind of like mindset, like
Yes.
management mindset.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that, and like, I guess just like what kind of mindset you need to have to pass this beast, you know?
Yes. So when taking this exam, you definitely want to know that you're not going to be the person in the weeds, right? You're not going to be the person that's blocking ports or, anything like that. Like, you're not going to be that security engineer in this scenario. You're
Right.
going to be a CEO. You're going to be a high-level executive. So when they're asking you these questions, you want to get the solution that's long-term, and I think Kelly even goes into explaining this, but if you have an example where, one of the options is blocking off this port or pulling the plug on this system or, updating policy or adding this information into policy. Like, if you really think about it, the policy is the guidance that comes down. Like, that is the overarching answer.
Right.
So you want to kind of step back for a second and look at the answer that's going to be the most high level, the most comprehensive, right? Because if you adjust the policy, then everything else falls under that umbrella.
Yep.
So one of the strategies that was for me was when I looked at questions, I looked at them to see which answer could include all of these.
So a bigger
right?
solution.
Bigger solution. You want to think bigger. You want to think CEO. What would the CEO do? He's not going to go and like disconnect this system, block this port. He's going to make sure that there are policies within this organization that prevent, these things from
and
happening.
Value, right?
And value.
Yep.
That was the other word, value, right? Which solution provides the most value here?
Yep.
Pulling the plug may provide value for this situation, but the policy that will provide it for, years or however long to come. So you want to think strategically and think long term and have a high level mindset. Like, what would the CEO do? Not what would Anastasia, the security engineer, do, or Baj, the developer, whoever would do. You want to think, what would the CEO think?
Yep. And I think you made a great point that, okay, you could like plug off the switch, but like you gotta think from a CIA triad perspective that,
Right.
okay, you might addressing integrity or confidentiality, but what about the availability, right? So
Right.
you wanna go for the answer or
Right.
solution which is taking care of everything.
Right.
And a lot of the time policies are used by leadership to address, bigger issues and show things from like a value perspective. So
Right.
that's one of the things we all need to focus on. Anastasia, I'm going to ask you one last question. So me personally, when I like read Sybex cover to cover, it was a very painful experience, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there. And I think in my last video I gave an example that I barely read my books back in college, and just like going through that book was a huge challenge.
Yeah.
When you read through the book, did you actually took notes? Did you highlight it? What do you recommend for people out there who just look at that thick book and just scared,
So for me, I think once again it's boiling back to knowing how you learn. So me personally, I know that information resonates with me when I write it down. Like, I'm a note taker, I'm a writer, like that's what I do. So
Right.
I think everybody, like, to a sense, you kind of have to know yourself. If you know that you reading cover to cover, you're not going to have anything in your mind, then you may want to try to take a different approach. Like, for me, the things that I knew that I was weaker on, I had to take notes, make little notes to myself, highlight, add certain stickies. If I didn't understand something, I had to highlight it so that I could say, okay, well, I didn't understand this. Why didn't I understand it?
Yep.
So I was definitely the person that was taking notes, highlighting, putting dog ears on pages to say, hey, I should go back. So I definitely think that there is some value in writing something. And I think it also gives me another way to be active. Like, if you're just reading, it's like, okay, you want to make sure that you're actually getting the information.
Yep.
So I think that this experience may vary from person to person, but me taking notes helps information stick. So I think if there's something that you don't know, if you see like triple DES and this DES and AES, and you're like, oh my God, that might be something that you need to, take the time to write. Okay, AES, what is that? Triple DES, what is that? DES, what is that? Just so that you're putting your focus into breaking that information down. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Reading that thick book is not going to be easy. It's going to hurt. You're gonna want to go outside and play with your friends. You're gonna want to throw the book. You're gonna be over it. But I definitely think if at a minimum you should write out the things that you don't understand, so then you know what you need to go back to and what you need to focus on.
Yep.
If it's information that's within your domain and within your purview and you're good with it, then maybe you might not have to take the time to go ahead and write those out.
Yep.
But your weak points, like I said, previously, the CISSP is meant to drill down into your weaker domains. So if you having trouble with the OSI model, or you can't recall all of the different layers, these might be things that you want to take the time to write it down now, because if you don't do it now, you're going to pay for it later.
Perfect.
I'm just saying, I hate to sound like there's no way around this.
And it's a hard exam.
It's a hard exam.
I mean, so I guess any last tips? I think one of the first things which I didn't do when I took the exam the first time was, of course, not watching why you will pass the exams. Any last tips for the audience out there? What do you recommend?
Yes.
Any last words of wisdom from Ms. Walker?
Yeah, so I definitely used a good amount of resources. One thing that I will say, maybe a few things, so probably 3 things. One thing is, if you haven't been taking, if you're not familiar with taking standardized tests and how that process goes, I would definitely recommend that you get some sort of test engine. I think I use Boson, and there's a few more out there. I think cccure or something like that.
Yep.
I would definitely recommend getting some sort of test engine so you can see how you hold up in these scenarios, right? Because this exam is a timed exam, so you don't want to run out of time on your exam. So I would definitely, you want to kind of mock. They say that you got to practice how you play. You kind of want to mock that exam stimulation so you can get your head in the game and see where your weaknesses is and what you need to focus on. So definitely recommend getting some sort of test engine, and then you'll also get into the habit of picking out the keywords, right? And then eliminating the 2 wrong answers, right? Because I think one thing I noticed in the exam is it always kind of comes down to 2 answers that seem like they are both correct.
Right.
They seem like they're both correct, but you don't want to choose the second best answer, okay? You don't want to be seduced.
That's too close to come.
It comes down to be very close. So I think one thing is important, definitely choosing those keywords, and then monitoring your time, and then making sure that you're able to do the process of elimination and get the right answer. The right answer, not the second best answer. Because that second best answer will always get you.
Perfect.
One more thing I would also like to add is, I watched Kelly Hands Why You Will Pass the CISSP exam, probably maybe 20 or so times. The day of the exam, I just had it on replay, back to back to back to back to back. I needed to have that mindset. That's a video that definitely helps you to get into the mindset. A lot of these questions, you can get them wrong, not because you don't know the information, but because you're not looking at it through the right lens. So I think watching that video is imperative to getting into that CEO, manager, high-level mindset.
Yep. And by the way, I'll make sure I have your post in the link as well for all the sources and all the content you recommended. So I'll make sure I do that for you.
Right. Thank you, Bosh. So definitely, if you do those 2 things, if you could get, because remember, this is an English language exam. You have to really figure out what are they asking you, not what you think they're asking you, what they're actually asking you.
Yep.
So
there you go, guys.
But you guys will pass. You guys got it. You guys got it.
So just so you know, you were our first guest, and I think we talk about this all the time, right? Even if one person could find this information helpful and be able to pass, our purpose is kind of fulfilled. Because when we were prepping for this stuff, we out there looking for stuff. Yeah. We went to Reddit, we went to all these posts and tried to get information.
Yes.
And I think a part of the reason we're starting this series is because we can have information out there for people who are prepping and who who are in our situation, because it was a very stressful journey.
It is stressful. And if you find a partner or someone else to work with, I would definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah.
One thing, Baj and I were studying together, we had different calls throughout the week, hey, well, what did you read? What did you learn? Or how do you feel about this? Or, just having those kind of check-ins and knowing that you're not going through it by yourself, I think is definitely helpful. So if you can get one of your coworkers or somebody else, or maybe find an online buddy in the Reddit feed or whatever that just needs somebody to help work through that with, I think that definitely holds you accountable and will definitely help you out.
Yep. Well, Miss Walker, it's been real. Thank
It's
you.
been real.
Thank you for
Thank you for having me.
Thank you
It's
for
been
being
awesome.
here.
So
And
good luck, you guys.
all right, guys, we'll speak to you guys next week. Keep believing, have faith, and you will make it.